Welcome to Midlife Women Entrepreneurs, where you'll find real stories, practical strategies, and the mindset shifts you need for entrepreneurship. If you've ever felt like midlife was too late to launch a business, write a book, or chase a dream, think again. I'm Lynette Turner, your host, and I'm bringing you inspiring conversations and practical tips to help nudge you forward and keep growing in midlife. So let's jump in. All right. Well, I have Johanna Danaher with me here today on Midlife Women Entrepreneurs. Johanna, welcome. You are about to share a very interesting story about your current reinvention. You are in the midst of it. I think you're only like maybe 6 to 8 months into what was a 25-year career in HR and talent development at Pfizer. Your role was unexpectedly eliminated, which I think a lot of the midlife women are going to face very quickly. And if they already haven't, you had already had a bit of a side hustle going. And so instead of going and looking deep into finding that job again in corporate, you used this moment, this event, really as a catalyst to go full on into your business called Anchor to Aspires. Before we get any further into it, I'm going to hand the floor over to you. I want you to give yourself a bit of an introduction, go deeper into that story, because that was just obviously it's just a little mini intro, and then we'll take it from there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Lynn. I'm so happy to be here to share, my story, my experiences, my struggles, and the areas that have really lifted me up. So again, as you said, I spent 25 years in corporate HR. I actually started as a marine biologist student. So I've done a couple of pivots in my career and my time throughout my journey. The biggest lesson and biggest learning that I've had is the importance of taking a pause when we have those moments of sort of pivot to really clarify what is important to me now. Right? Because oftentimes we're so stuck in I'm so used to this is my career. This is how I identify myself. This is how I define myself, that we don't take that moment to give ourselves the opportunity to explore what is it that I'm doing, and how does that really align to what brings me joy, and how does that really align to what my life purpose is all about. So my journey has been one of introspection. My journey has been one of exploration, and it's an area of opportunity that I bring to my clients that I work with in how they experience and explore their own pivots.
Exactly. So let's go back to that day where you felt like it was a little bit unexpected when your 25-year role ended. What was the first thing that you thought about? Maybe more like what you told yourself, like that inner voice at that moment, and then how's it kind of shifted over the months after?
So the first feeling was grief, but also interestingly, because I was sort of already starting to think about what could the next me be when I was looking towards semi or early retirement. I was excited. So I had grief, I had sorrow, I had fear, and I had excitement. I told myself I wasn't ready for going out on my own. And that's why I was sort of thinking that it was 4 or 5 years away from me. And I continued to say that to myself. I'm not really ready. I really should rethink this. I don't know if I have the skills to, be a solopreneur. I'm going to miss the network I have. So there were lots of stories I told myself. And it was over the holiday break, over the sort of New Year weekends of last year, where I sat myself down in a lot of ways, and I was having a conversation with my daughter, but I also was challenging myself to say, you know what, you do have it. My daughter was a freshman in college, and she was thinking about what is it that she wants to do. And I was like, well, wait, if I could give her advice, I need to actually listen to the same advice that I'm giving to my daughter for me. And I have to think about believing in myself. I have to trust myself. And I wasn't doing that. So I wasn't giving myself the space to do that.
Exactly. As you had mentioned just now, that you were already kind of working on something else, which was the coaching side of it. You were just sort of naturally drawn to that, but you were kind of like, I'll paraphrase, maybe waiting it out until, you said like maybe retirement, or you were going to take maybe a little bit early retirement. So I think there's many midlife women who are waiting it out, so to speak, until retirement, right? What would you say to a woman who's similar to you, 3 years away, maybe 4 years away from retirement, and feels safe in her golden handcuffs now that you've gone through it? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I would say two things. Oftentimes we get caught in this myth of the corporate safety net. right? That there's this, as you say, the golden handcuffs, right? So we feel like we have to stay at a place that may no longer be serving us. We feel that we have to continue on in a role that may just not be giving us joy anymore. And what I found is that, there is no sort of quote corporate safety net. It is something that actually ends up holding us back from doing our best work. So I would challenge that when we feel comfortable, when we feel that it's a moment we just have to stay, if we tell ourselves, I have to do this, I challenge us to think about, how do we know that's true? And do we really have to? Right? Because have to energy is the energy that holds us back. When we actually say, I choose to, that's the energy that projects and pushes us forward, right? So what are you really choosing to do in this moment? Are you choosing to stay stuck? Are you choosing to stay in a role that you are not evolving in? Or are you choosing to look at how you can, evolve, whether that is staying with the organization that you may be in or stepping into something that's new and maybe a little bit frightening.
I think like everything you just said there is so true. And sometimes we can think that it's starting over, right? So, do I quit now? Oh, do I really want to start over? Do I really want to start this business? How would you suggest to somebody to reframe that into carrying these transferable skills and brilliance and greatness forward?
So I think one of the things is to recognize that everything that we have learned in our career is something we're going to be taking forward with us. I call it transferable brilliance. And it's not just a skill that we've built over time. I mean, we are awesome women. We have learned how to navigate complexity, how to thrive in the changing environment, how to be a role model for others around us. All of these things are transferable into whatever's next for us. What we have to learn how to do, or at least in my case, I had to learn how to do, was trust that was enough. And I didn't believe that for a long time. I didn't believe that I had what it takes to be on my own. So I kept telling myself I have to wait until, sometime in the future, and you subconsciously knowing that I probably wouldn't ever get there. Because if I kept waiting for the right time to start, I probably would never have started. So I like to also challenge the fact that there's the right time to start. There's no right time to start. Just start. Just try. Just do it. And see what happens and learn from it.
But we don't often think that way. And until we get down this path, and like you launched Anchor to Aspire, and now you're thinking, oh, perfect. I mean, it's not without its challenges either, but you're thinking, well, that wasn't that hard. Talk us through that. Walk us through, what is your business? How did you decide on that model? I know that you're kind of dipping your toe into a few other things. So you're sort of testing. You're in that minimal viable product stage. You're testing what's working, what's not working. So give us a little bit of a journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll tie it back to sort of what we were just talking about, because how I came up with the idea of the company name is connected to a belief that I carry and that I try to bring forward to the clients I serve, which is that we live in paradox, right? So the idea is that in order to aspire to who we want to become, we have to be anchored in who we are, right? So there's a little bit of that sort of paradox. You're not going to become or who you want to be until you recognize and acknowledge and love all of the parts of who you are. It's also built on the idea that the ocean is in and of itself pretty paradoxical, right? It is chaos and calm. It is the giver of life and a destructor of life. It is a storm and sunlight. So that is how we can hold things that seem opposed, equally true, and actually in the same moment. We can have grief and sorrow and joy and happiness all at once. We can feel multiple emotions all at the same time. We can be excited about our business and terrified about our business, and that's okay. Right. And I think that's one of the things that I was trying to build the business all around, is embracing the paradox that we live in, because otherwise we tend to stay stuck. And it's also what I believe optimism is all about, right? Optimism is all about seeing both the storm and the sunlight. We cannot be optimistic without recognizing the reality that we're operating in and still choosing to move forward and respond in a positive way, right? So that's sort of what my whole business mentality has been. It's why I built the brand in that way, so we can truly embrace that duality of who we are and how we operate. So that's a little bit about sort of how it came to be and a little bit about my philosophy. And I really focus in on working with, high potential mid-career, midlife women who are in those pivotal moments and, making some sort of a change, whether it's empty nesting, whether it's menopause, whether it's a new career, whether it is stepping into a leadership role. So whatever that pivotal moment is, it's really thinking about how do we bring more optimism? How do we bring more energy into that space?
Oh, I love that. And so tell us a little bit about like how you designed the program itself. Like,
Mhm.
is it, do you have a framework that you're using? Just walk us through. If I sat down and we started working together, what would be sort of the journey that you would take me on as your client?
So thank you for asking that. So it is called the Waves Transformation Journey because I'm sort of building in on that anchoring with the ocean, stemming from my marine biology background. But we start off with an energy leadership index, and that is an assessment that allows us to understand how we are showing up in our day to day and how we show up under stress, right? So where is our energy going and what's happening to us when there is something that is triggering a stress response? So we start out there because that's so important, right? Because if we don't understand our energy, then we don't understand, how or why we're making the decisions that we're making. And we can be held back by some of the inner blocks that exist in all of us, whether that's a limiting belief we carry, or whether that is an assumption that we're making. So we really want to spend time understanding how energy is showing up for each individual. And then we would shift into following sort of the waves transformation journey, which starts with really a deeply understanding who we are at our core, right? So what are the things that bring us joy? Who are we and who are we aspiring to be? Then I work through the A in the WAVES acronym is abilities and action. So we uncover what are our core skills, our foundational knowledge, our transferable brilliance, right? So what are the things that make us who we are from a skills, abilities, and knowledge perspective? And then we talk about values, right? And I think a lot of times many people have done a values assessment at some point in their lives, probably early in their careers, but we don't often go back to it to relook at the values. Now, I would argue that there are core and fundamental values that probably don't change over time, but there are others that will be influenced by moments in our lives. And it's really important when we're making a pivotal change to relook at those values. What are the values that we want to guide us going forward versus what has brought us to this point? And then I do a little bit more deeper dive on energy, but this time from an understanding of what are the things that are sabotaging our behaviors, right? So if we know our skills, we know our abilities, we know our values, we have to understand what is it that is saboteur, right? It's usually our strength that's overused, that's holding us back or impacting us in some way. And then we close out the work together with redefining success on our own terms.
Yeah, I love it. It's such a journey arc, you know? So when we let's really talk about the offer itself. How did you decide, like, this is a coaching package, I take it. So it's,
Yes.
can somebody just work with you on a certain, maybe just the
Mhm.
A or the E, or when they come in, like, how did you sort of decide to structure your offers in a way that
Mhm.
made sense for a lot of people?
Yeah, so I look at it in a couple of different ways. I've created two ways that you can engage, right? So there's one where you could come in and I call it the clarity current. It starts with the assessment and then it explores one of the waves, right? So you could say, I really want to focus on values at this moment. So it's a very short, 2 to 3, journey session, depending upon the specific need. Or then there's the opportunity to go through all 5 of the waves in a short program. Or then there's an opportunity to go through and go deep in each one of the waves. And we can really customize that based on what the need is, right? So if someone is stepping into a leadership role, we may spend more time in the energy space to understand what are the things that are sabotaging leadership behaviors in the workplace. Or if somebody is actually exploring a completely different career path, we may spend more time in the V, right, to understand what are those values that are becoming more and more important to you. So there's flexibility depending upon what your specific, need and goal is. But again, I offer 3 ways to engage. One, very quick, focus on one wave. The other, we do the whole arc, but it's just one session per arc, and then the other is very bespoke to really understand, do we want to go deep and do multiple sessions per wave depending upon your need.
Okay, I love that. And so, what did you use any sort of like business framework out there to like go, okay, I'm going to create this offer, and this offer. When I think about somebody who wants to start a business of their own, it's like, well, what is going to be my offer? And a lot of time I'll say just start with a minimal viable product or service, and then that's just your basics. And then it sort of sounds like you've already done a little bit of the work with some of your clients to realize, okay, you're going to start to shape it later, or did you shape it just right out of the gate that way?
So there's two things. So I really started with the basics, right? So I defined the waves and said, we're going to focus in on, the sort of, how do I jumpstart this, right? The clarity current, right? Really making sure that I'm getting feedback all from the clients I'm working with to ensure that they're getting what they need out of it. And then I also put together the broader framework. And some of the things that I used were my coaching cohort to do some research as to what were other coaches in my market, in my niche offering, and understanding what was working for them. I did a lot of deep research in Reddit to understand, well, what were some of the challenges that people were talking about in community forums? So I was looking for, how can I provide a service that's addressing a problem that people are talking about? And then I also spent time just interviewing other coaches to understand how they structured, their offering, so I could, learn from what worked and what didn't work. And, as coaching, we also have some wonderful resources in the International Coaching Federation. So there's some great business practices there that they highlighted as, good ways to get started. But keep it simple was sort of my mantra. It's always my mantra. I love simplicity. So keep it simple so people know what they're getting, and then, be bespoke, be structured enough, but fluid enough to allow you to have that flexibility.
You had mentioned that you perform an energy audit on your client at the beginning, just I guess I understand where they're at, where they're coming at. And I guess even from a coach, you got to understand, what are you up against with this person? And you've got to sort of be able to coach the gremlin as well. So, but my question is how did you apply that same framework to your own business strategy for deciding what offers really light you up and kind of what drain you?
So for me, I found the energy audit. It's by far my favorite assessment. So I've been trained on multiple. I've done multiple. This was so transformative for me, and I grew in my ability to cultivate higher energy levels at decision points in my life after having been exposed to this work. And I used that on a regular basis to test myself, is to say, what would a level 6 sort of energy level, out of the 7 levels of energy, level 6 is one about, joy and, creativity and being in flow. What would a level 6 response be? Or what would a level 1, like victim, right? It's sort of apathy. Something's happening to me, as opposed to, looking for the opportunity. So I really try to make sure that any decision that I'm making or any type of material that I'm putting together is looked at from a lens of the energy and how do I want this to show up in the world. Most of what is my biggest saboteur is a people pleaser, which tends to come out at level 4 energy, which means that, I'm really connected. I'm really focused on serving others. It's sort of that idea that I get joy and I get energy when I am in service of you. But that often means that I put my own self-care needs under the table and don't honor my boundaries. And so that's where I have to be really careful about, how is it that I'm, structuring the work that I'm doing or the offering I'm making to ensure it's serving both my clients, but also not depleting me.
You had sort of alluded to 7 levels within that energy audit. Can you share those? Just the 7, just even name them?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is all based on Bruce Schneider's work from the International IPEX. Level 1 is that level of energy of sort of victimhood, right? It's apathy. So if you have this perception and this feeling that you lose, right? Something's being done to you. Your action may just be to not take any action, right? You sort of withdraw. And that's an important place to be sometimes, right? When we're having grief, we have to sort of land at level 1 energy so we can process that emotion, and then we can choose sort of where do we go next. Level 2 energy is the sort of the core thought here is conflict, right? This is the level of sort of antagonism, right? You're coming into the conversation. Maybe there's a little bit of anger. Maybe there's a little bit of defiance, right? And again, all of these energy levels, regardless of whether they are lower or catabolic or anabolic higher, are levels we move in and out of at any point during our day, right? It's just about being intentional, being aware, and choosing where we should respond from versus react from. And as you continue to move from the catabolic energy through to the anabolic energy, the next level, level 3, is the level of sort of responsibility. There's acceptance and toleration and forgiveness and cooperation happening here. But this also may be sort of, not, or you're tolerating, right? You may not be addressing the elephant in the room. You may be tolerating the experience to keep the status quo. And that might be important to do, but that can't be sustainable, right, over the long term. Then as we continue to move up, the next level, level 4, is the sort of the level of compassion, right? So this is really the helper energy. So this is where you are acting in service of others. There's this concern for others. It's about ensuring that others win, and that, there's a lot of gratitude happening here. But this is also where self-care and self-compassion may take a back seat, because we're focused on that helper energy, right? Of doing for others and in service of them, but then neglecting our own needs. As we continue moving up into the much more anabolic levels, level 5 is really that level of peace. That's reconciliation. We both win, right? It's about understanding. It's about collaborating with others. It's about being confident and, bringing that sort of energy of connection into the conversation. And that brings us to level 6, which is the level of the connector, right? The true connector. This is not only about connecting with others, this is about connecting with ideas. This is synthesis. This is intuition. This is joy. This is wisdom. And then the final level, level 7, is really sort of absolute passion, right? The highest consciousness, right? So this is where you live a life of absolute non-judgment. This is creation. And, you can completely believe that you can create the world around you. And no human can sort of ever operate 100% at level 7. And that's why there's all of the other levels of energy, right? But it's understanding when there's a stress trigger, where are we actually reacting from? Where do we land under stress? Are we landing in victimhood or anger? And are we reacting from there? Or are we, choosing to respond?
How are you applying that framework into your business?
Yeah. So absolutely, we do. We have an average sort of area, each and every one of us, depending situationally, sort of where we are today, where we would typically operate from. For me, I typically operate from that level 4 helper, but also a little bit of that level 6 connector. But when I'm under stress, I go right down to level 2 and level 1. So the victim and the anger. And I look at it by telling my story, right? So I talk about how I might land in those spaces, but I don't stay there very long. Right. So because I become aware that is my default for when I'm under stress, I can now consciously choose to take a pause, to say, I need to reset. I need to accept that this is happening. I need to ask myself what I know to be true. And I need to ask myself, now, how do I want to respond? So I use it as a signal. And that's what we talk about in the coaching conversations, is how do you get better at recognizing your energy, and how do you get better at recognizing the stress trigger so you understand what your stress response is? Because we all have that. I mean, it's fight or flight, right? I mean, we are wired biologically to have the fight or flight, response, because we need to protect ourselves, right? That is what we have to do. But we can't stay there, right? If we stay there, we're always acting from this sense of protection. We're always in this survival mode, and it's exhausting, and it's going to lead to burnout, right? So we have to think about, how do we actually take that pause? How do we create that space for renewal in order to kind of come back up to this idea of being able to perform at our best?
And it just makes me think, like, as a solopreneur, how do you decide what's worth investing in your business, whether it's a new certification, it's a tool or a framework, like you just talked about, a marketing system? Like, when you're sitting down, you're like, okay, I'm at world headquarters here. and I'm running my business and, maybe there's a gap. So what is your sort of approach to
Mhm.
closing some gaps in your business?
So this is an interesting question, and I love it because I tend to be the person who has a zillion ideas floating around up in my head, and I want to synthesize all of them together, and I want to try everything all at once because I love it. I love being that early adopter. I love being the tester. I love trying things. I like seeing how it goes, and I'm very experimental and experiential, right? So I have to actually hold myself back, right? Because I will be the first one to say, "Oh, that looks really interesting. I want to do that. I want to have an AI me or whatever it might be today." So I actually have to tell myself, no, let's actually look at very strategic questions. How will this serve my client? Will this be something that will be a benefit to my client? That's the first conversation and first question. Then I have to look at what is the return on investment, right? I really want to understand the ROI. So it has to meet client would benefit, but if it's not going to give me some sort of a return that is not just satisfaction, it has to have some sort of, other return on the investment. So those are the two big ones. And I do like to be the early adopter a lot of times because that also gives you the opportunity to influence how others are actually building and designing products that might be of use to me. But the first thing it has to meet is it's going to create an experience that creates an emotional connection for my client, right? So it's that whole systems
Yeah.
or design centric approach, really being human centric. I want it to make a difference and I want it to create a meaningful emotional connection for my clients, for them and me together. That's the key. If it doesn't do that, then it's probably not something I'm going to invest in.
Yeah, no, I like it. I like it. So let's kind of pivot a little bit or shift a little bit. I don't think it's pivoting. I think it's shifting a little bit more into your growth strategy. So when you think about your business, and I know you're still early in, you're less than a year, you're, minimal viable product, you're building it out, adapting, bespoking, all that kind of stuff. But when you think about it, where would you want to focus? Like what is your current growth strategy?
Yeah, so right now I'm focused in on, the getting the basics set up, right? As you said, the minimal viable product, and then ensuring that I have the right tech, that I have the right business stuff, all of the accounting, the whole nine yards. I've got to get all of that working seamlessly for me. I also have to then pivot into creating community. So that's the next stage for me. It's not just enough for me to work one-on-one with the clients that I have or push contents, out through channels like this and this conversation. It's how do I create space for people to come together? Because I truly believe that when we build each other up, we will collectively be much more successful. So my next phase in 2026 is to create that type of a community for women and enable those connections to happen. And then the other thing is I'm really passionate about paying it forward. So there are, many individuals in my community who may not have access to a one-on-one coach or even to some of these online communities. So how can I create those experiences through short, simple, community-based workshops, right? So working with my bank, my local bank in town has they're called Chelsea Groton. They have Chelsea Groton U. So I'd love to be partnering with them to think about how do I bring some of these ideas to their small business owners, or how do I work with the Chamber of Commerce in my community to create workshops that allow women leaders to have access to the coaching that they may not otherwise be able to access.
I love that community side of it. I think that women, we like to be in communities, and I think that if you can create that, and even just some of I'm going to say sort of less technical solution there where you're just like, let's go work with the local bank. Let's go to my local business, chamber of commerce, or, go back to that sort of grassroots kind of way of getting your message out, making an impact at the same time. So it's awesome. So how do you define success for Anchor to Aspire right now?
Good question. and one I've been pondering for quite a long time, because for me, it has to be, I mean, there has to be two things, right? It has to be a viable business that is generating an income, but that's not really success for me, right? Success for me in the business is that I have helped, bring some happiness and some joy and the ability to cultivate optimism into the world. So I know that's very big and very grandiose and a huge, huge mission. But if I can do that one person at a time, that's success for me. If that comes with a paycheck, obviously I need that. Clearly I have to, have a business that is, producing income for my family. But it really is about success being that I've made someone else successful.
Yeah, made a difference. For you to get a review like, she really made a difference. I mean, that for me, that's yeah, the same,
Yeah.
the same.
Because
So
I've already spent 25 years sort of, going for that paycheck, right? And the benefits and all of the things that we believe and know that we need in order to, be thriving. But it's so much more important to know that the work that you're doing is aligned with your purpose. Now, my purpose and what drives me is different than other women, and it's different than my husband, it's different than my daughter. But as long as we're aligning to that, that's success for me.
on our pre-call, Johanna, you had mentioned that you were going to start in the area of sort of menopause coaching program. And again, I know you're just in sort of the development stage of everything, but like, how do you feel right now today that's going to fit in your overall business model? Is it going to be an extension of your core offer, or is it going to be sort of a new sort of avatar, new client offering?
So I'd say it's a little bit of both. So I'm finalizing my certification in that space, but so many women who are in a moment of a pivot, right? They may be also experiencing menopause, right? And may not have the words, the language, the knowledge to understand what that is impacting. So I'm going to weave it in to my one-on-one programs. I'm going to bring it in from a content perspective into my community to share information, because we need to create a conversation around that. And ultimately, long-term growth, probably not until 2027 or even 2028, would be to have it as a separate offering, to really focus in on, here's a menopause coaching offering, just inclusive all of itself. But otherwise, right now, for the near term, it will be integrated.
And I love everything you said there, because I think this is what people need to hear, is that you're testing, right? You've got an idea. I'm going to incorporate it. I'm going to test it, test, see what happens. And then, hey, in a couple of years, if it does turn where I can move it into a separate offer, or I should, or it makes sense to move it into a separate offer, then you should. And I think that sometimes we can stop ourselves from offering something because we don't have the skill. We haven't got the certification yet. Everybody knows that you have to keep growing. And I loved when you were saying that you're still, you're still getting certified in it.
Mhm.
And, I'm going to test it while I'm getting my certification. When I get my certification, I'm going to keep testing it more. So that's, in my mind, that organic way of making an offer that resonates with your clients.
Yeah.
Well done.
Thank you. And I think there's two things that I'll just, expand on slightly. It's like this belief of progress over perfection. Now, I tend to and have tended to have more of a perfectionist mindset in my career. Sometimes that may have become just because of the environment we were in. But I've really leaned on progress over perfection. Right? We have to make meaningful progress, right? If we wait until everything's perfect, we'll never get it done, or we'll have missed the opportunity. And it's also, feedback is the biggest gift I could ever receive, right? I love feedback. I have to tell myself I love feedback because sometimes feedback can hurt, but that's what I need to know, right? I need that feedback in order to grow. I don't look at it as failure. I don't look at it as I made a mistake. I looked at it as, okay, I got some feedback that this isn't working, or I got some feedback that, yes, you got to go here all in. And I'm like, ooh, okay, maybe it wasn't really what I thought. But that feedback is so important. It doesn't I could deliver anything, right? But if I'm not delivering what you need and you're not telling me how you experienced it, then it's probably not going to land. So I need that feedback and I welcome it every day.
Yeah, it's like you've created this little incubator. And I think that if you think about that, lots of startups, they go to these incubators where they're learning from other people, they're getting feedback, they're pitching their concepts. It's no different from, doing a startup tech business or a product business to a startup in what you're offering as service. So I like it. It's good.
I love that framing. I hadn't thought of it that way, and that is brilliant. It is absolutely that entire sort of way that we're approaching this. I absolutely love that, this incubator. It's fantastic.
It feels safer too. I mean, I think that, as you had sort of mentioned at the very beginning of our call, it's like it's sort of fear and you're sort of living in this paradox between excitement and fear and da da da. But if you just think of it, well, I'm just incubating and we'll see what happens. And if it doesn't work and I got feedback that it didn't, have big shoulders and let it go, pivot, make your pivots. And yeah, so I've got a couple more questions for you. So for women who are still in corporate, let's go back full circle. They're counting down to retirement. What are the first 2 or 3 things they should start doing now to prepare for their next chapter?
So, there's a couple things. The first would be give yourself some grace. And I say that because oftentimes we're saying we can't leave or we don't want to. So it's give yourself some grace first and foremost, because if we don't, we continuously judge and compare ourselves to others, right? So focus on just loving yourself and being proud of yourself for what you've accomplished and for the fact that you're starting to think about what's next for you. So be proud of that moment. The second is cultivate self-trust. We have to do that. And I think, just regardless of whether we're making a change now, a few years from now, or we're staying in the role that we're in, self-trust is really important. And oftentimes it's very easy to erode. We are our worst critic, right? So it's like cultivating that self-trust and really cultivating the inner coach as opposed to the inner critic. So I like to talk about that a lot, right? We will criticize ourselves, we will hold ourselves back. But if we actually pivot that voice and say, thank you for trying to protect us from something that might harm us or that we might be fearful of, but let's coach instead, that is a huge, huge opportunity, and it opens things up. And then the second is, get out there and explore and network. I've also been thinking about the network as being not just who I know, right, that I can connect with on, LinkedIn or in my community. It's actually how well does my network know me? So how authentic am I being? How open am I being? How connected how much do I put of myself out into the world, right? Because again, the network is only as good as the network is, right? And if they don't know you and they don't know who you are, then they don't know the real you, and then they don't know how to help.
And I love that because I think so many people want to help, actually, probably more so than they want to actually help themselves. They want to help others. I even have seen it in my programs when we've met on a Friday and, where I put out a challenge statement or, hey, is anybody want to be on the hot seat this week? Everybody else is like, yeah, let's get that person in the hot seat because I want to help that person. But if they don't know what you need, they can't help. So it's so simple, but a lot of us prevent it.
Well, we don't ask for help, right? Because
I know.
We've been conditioned to say that asking for help is weak, but no, asking for help, I think, is our strongest asset. When we say, hey, I need help with this, it opens up the opportunity for possibilities, for connections, for meaningful relationships, for learning something new in a different way. So I say, ask for help and ask for help a lot.
Yeah, exactly. What do you think is the biggest untapped potential in midlife women, both as a market and as a movement?
I think right now, particularly in this environment, it is really understanding menopause. And I kind of go back to that because of my own journey in that space. I had no clue what was going on, and I felt like I was alone, and I didn't have a network of people to talk with. It was something we just didn't talk about. We had no opportunities to really discuss it at work. And that held me back from a lot of things. Like, take speaking engagements in the working environment because I just didn't know what my body was going to do. And I didn't feel safe to talk about the fact that I was having, symptoms that possibly many other women in my same team were also having. So I think that there's a huge opportunity here to create. And I'm starting to see it. And I'm starting to see a lot more conversation about what is this and why is it important and why should we talk about it from a business perspective, or why should we create programs that support women who are, going through this moment. So it's starting, but there's a lot more opportunity there. And interestingly enough, and I don't know enough about this, but in Rhode Island, there is some sort of legislation that is requiring employers to create reasonable accommodations for women who are experiencing menopause symptoms. So there's movement also from an employer perspective as well.
So, Johanna, you've been wonderful. I'm going to ask you one more question. If you could leave listeners with one mindset shift and one business action step to start today, what would you recommend?
So from a mindset perspective, it's October. So it's all about optimistic October for me. So it's about cultivating optimism. And I don't believe that optimism is something that you're born with. I think it's something that we practice and we build over time, right? It is a mindset shift. We have to look for the opportunity in the challenge. And it is a recognizing that those two things, we can hold them both equally true at any given time. So really think about cultivating optimism. And I think that that's important for life as well as for business, right? Because there will be times in your business that you have no idea what is going to happen next. And you feel defeated or depleted because what you thought was going to be a great offering, it just didn't land, and you didn't, you didn't sell, or you went and you did a speaking or a workshop that just didn't land well, whatever it may be. How do we cultivate that optimistic thinking in those moments of challenge is really important. And then the business item I would be is go out and network, meet others, and ask, how can I help? And say, I need help with.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. That's excellent. Okay, so where can the people find you?
The best way to find me is on my website. It's anchortoaspire.com.
Well, you've been a real joy. Thank you for sharing your early stages of your startup, and looking forward to, watching your journey. So we'll get connected on LinkedIn.
Wonderful. And thank you so much for the opportunity to come and speak with your listeners today. I really enjoyed the time.
My pleasure. Thank you. Hey, it's Lynette. Thanks for listening today. Please like and subscribe. And if there's somebody out there that you think could benefit from the episode, give it a share. Midlife is your time, so go get it.